I did not say a word. I did not get up from the table. I picked up my wine glass, took one slow sip, set it back down, and smiled at my son-in-law like I had all the time in the world. He had no idea what that smile meant. My daughter's name is Renée. She is 34 years old, and she has her father's eyes, quick, watchful, always a little amused at the world. When she was 9, she wrote a letter to the mayor of Halifax complaining about the state of the public library's children's section. She signed it with her full name and included a bibliography. The mayor actually wrote back, "I have kept that letter in a frame above my desk for 25 years. When Renée told me she was getting married, I was glad. I had met her husband, his name was Garrett, 3 times by then, and each time he had been polite, attentive, quick to laugh. He worked in commercial real estate in Toronto, which is where Renée had moved after her master's degree. He had nice manners and strong opinions about hockey, which in this country is practically a personality type in itself. He seemed fine. He seemed more than fine. He seemed like someone who would take care of my daughter, and my daughter, who had never needed anyone to take care of her, seemed happy. I should have paid closer attention to the word seemed. My husband passed 8 years ago. Heart attack sudden, the kind that gives you no warning and no time. After that it was just me in the house in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, the house where Renée grew up, with its draughty windows and its view of the harbour and the garden I had been trying to keep alive since 1987. I retired from family law the year after my husband died. 31 years of practice. I had handled custody disputes, adoption proceedings, restraining orders, separation agreements. I had sat across the table from people in the worst moments of their lives and helped them find a way through. I knew what a controlled person looked like. I knew what someone who was performing calm looked like. I had spent 3 decades being paid to tell the difference. I am telling you this, not to boast. I am telling you this, not to boast. I am telling you this because it matters later. The first time something felt wrong, Renée and Garrett had been married about 8 months. She called me on a Tuesday evening in February. She almost always called on weekends, so Tuesday alone caught my attention. And she sounded careful. That is the only word for it. Careful. Like she was measuring each sentence before she released it. She said everything was fine. She said work was good. She said they had gone to a dinner party at Garrett's colleague's house the weekend before, and it had been lovely. Then she paused in a way that had too much space in it, and I said, "Renée, what is it?" And she said, "Nothing, Mum, I'm just tired." I let it go. I should not have let it go. But I did. The second time she came home for Easter. I noticed that she had stopped wearing the small gold earrings she had worn almost every day since she was 19, the ones her father gave her. When I asked about them, she said she had misplaced them. She touched her earlobe when she said it, the way she used to touch her earlobe as a child when she was telling me something that was almost true. Garrett came with her for Easter. He was charming at the table. He complimented my lamb, asked intelligent questions about the garden, offered to fix the hinge on the back door that had been sticking since November. He and Renée sat beside each other, and twice I watched him reach over and squeeze her hand, and she smiled, and the smile was warm, but it did not reach the place behind her eyes where her real smile lives. After dinner, when Garrett had gone to bed and Renée and I were washing up, I stood beside her at the sink and said quietly, "Are you all right? Actually all right?" She kept her eyes on the dish she was drying. Then she said, "He just has strong opinions about things. It's not a big deal." "What kinds of things?" "Things. How I dress. How much time I spend on the phone with you. Whether I need to be working the hours I work when he makes enough for both of us." She set the dish down. "He's not wrong, Mum. I do work too much." I did not say anything. I dried my hand on the tea towel and I thought about 31 years of family law, and I filed what she had said very carefully in the part of my mind where I keep things I am not ready to look at directly. By autumn, Renée had changed her phone number and did not explain why. She had left her job at the consulting firm she had worked at for 6 years, a job she had loved, a job she had been good at, and was doing part-time bookkeeping for one of Garrett's friends' companies. When I asked about it, she said it had been her idea. She said she had been burnt out. I had known my daughter for 34 years, and I had never once heard her use the word burnt out to describe herself. Garrett's sister, her name was Pamela. She was 2 years younger than Garrett, sharp-tongued in the way of people who mistake cruelty for wit, had begun appearing in conversations more and more. Pamela had very firm opinions about what a marriage should look like, which I found interesting given that her own marriage had ended after 3 years. She had apparently told Renée that a woman who prioritized her career over her husband's comfort was signaling her priorities. She had said this at a dinner in front of other people, and Renée had said nothing. My Renée had said nothing. My Renée, who at 9 years old had written to the mayor, who had argued a case study in her law school moot so well that the professor had asked to keep a copy. That Renée had sat at a dinner table and said nothing. When Renée's 35th birthday came in January, I drove from Dartmouth to Toronto. It is a 2-day drive in winter, and I did it because I was not going to miss my daughter's birthday, and because I wanted to see her. I booked a room at a hotel nearby. Garrett had made a comment the previous Christmas about space in the house that I had chosen to respect rather than challenge, and on the evening of her birthday we all went out to dinner. It was Garrett's choice of restaurant. He had chosen a very expensive steakhouse in the financial district, the kind of place with leather menus and lighting designed to make everyone look important. Pamela came. Garrett's 2 colleagues and their wives came. I came. We had been seated perhaps 20 minutes when Renée looked at the menu and said, quietly, that she was thinking of the salmon. Garrett looked up from his menu. He did not raise his voice. That is the thing people do not understand about men like Garrett. They very rarely raise their voice in public. He said pleasantly, the way you might explain something to a child, "We talked about this, Ren. This is a steakhouse. You order steak at a steakhouse." Renée said, "I know, I just thought, you thought." He smiled. He picked up his wine. "Okay, sure. If you need me to order for you, I can order for you. That's fine." The table went quiet for just a moment. One of the colleagues' wives glanced at her husband. I felt my hand tighten around my wine glass. Then Pamela laughed. It was a light, social laugh, the kind designed to dissolve tension by pretending the tension wasn't real. She said, "Some women just need a little guidance with these things," and she smiled at me, including me in the joke. I looked at my daughter. Renée was looking at the table. Her jaw was set in the way it sets when she is working very hard not to show what she is feeling. She was 35 years old, and it was her birthday, and she was sitting in a restaurant her husband had chosen, and she had not been permitted to order fish. I picked up my wine glass. I took one slow sip. I set it down. I smiled. Then I excused myself to use the restroom. In the restroom I stood at the sink and I ran the cold water and I looked at myself in the mirror for about 15 seconds. Then I took out my phone and I called a colleague of mine. Her name is Frances, and she has been practicing family law in Ontario for 27 years, and we met at a conference in Ottawa in 2003 and have been friends since. I told her I was sorry to call on a Saturday evening. I told her what I observed over the past year and a half. I told her what I had just watched happen at a birthday dinner table. I asked her if she had capacity to take a case, when the time came, if it came. She said yes. I went back to the table. I ordered the salmon in solidarity with my daughter, and when the waiter looked at Garrett for confirmation, I looked at the waiter and said pleasantly, "The salmon, please." "Thank you." The waiter wrote it down. Garrett said nothing, but I felt his eyes on me for the rest of the meal. I stayed in Toronto for 4 days. I want to be honest about what those 4 days were like, because I think it matters. I did not charge in. I did not issue ultimatums. I've spent enough time in courtrooms to know that the fastest way to lose someone is to make them feel they must choose sides before they are ready. Coercive control. And that is what this was, I want to name it plainly. Coercive control works partly by making the person inside it feel that they are the problem, that their perceptions cannot be trusted, that leaving would be an overreaction. Telling Renée to leave would have done nothing. Less than nothing. So I watched. I listened. I had coffee with her alone on the second morning, at a cafe near her apartment while Garrett was at the office. She talked about small things at first, a television show she had been watching, the weather, the road conditions on my drive up, and then she said, not looking at me, "He's been better lately. He's been trying." I asked what trying looked like. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He let me go to Stephanie's birthday drinks last month, without him." She said it like it was a gift. She said it like "let" was a perfectly ordinary word to use about your own freedom. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, and I asked her, as gently as I could, if she had her own bank account, separate from the joint account. She looked at me then. I said, "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking a practical question." She said no. She had closed her personal account when they moved in together. Garrett had thought it was cleaner that way. He managed their finances and gave her a monthly amount for personal expenses. She called it her personal budget. And I noticed she chose that word deliberately, chose it over the word allowance, as if the difference between them mattered. On the fourth morning before I drove home, she hugged me goodbye in the parking garage of her building, and she held on longer than usual, and I held her back and I did not say anything because I did not trust my voice. She smelled like the same shampoo she had used since university. She felt like my daughter, the one who existed before all of this, still in there, just very quiet. I drove the first hour out of Toronto before I pulled into a rest stop on the 401 and sat in my car and cried properly. Then I blew my nose, had some of the terrible coffee from my thermos, and kept driving. When I got home, I began keeping notes. Dates, observations, things Renée had told me, things I had witnessed myself. I wrote them in a notebook, not on my phone, not on my laptop, in a physical notebook that I kept in the drawer of my bedside table. 31 years of practice had taught me that documentation is not pessimism. Documentation is preparation. 3 months after the birthday dinner, Renée called me on a Thursday afternoon. She had been crying. She did not tell me why at first. She said she was just having a hard week. I said I could come. She said no. I said I could come. She said, "Mum, it's fine. I'm fine." Then she told me. The previous weekend, there had been an argument about money, specifically about the fact that she had spent $83 at the drugstore on skincare products without telling Garrett first. He had seen the charge on the joint account and confronted her about it. She said confronted, and then immediately corrected herself to brought it up, and I noted the correction. During the argument, he had grabbed her arm above the elbow. He had grabbed it hard enough to leave a mark. She said it was an accident. She said he had been upset, and he had reached out without thinking. She said it had never happened before. I asked if it had happened before. She was quiet. I said, "Renée, has something like this happened before?" "Not this, exactly. Anything." She said there had been one other time. 5 months ago. He had shoved her in the hallway during an argument, and she had hit her shoulder on the doorframe. She had not told anyone. She had told herself it was a bad night, an aberration, that she had pushed back in the argument too hard. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, "I want you to take some photographs of your arm right now. I want you to send them to me, and I want you to save them somewhere he cannot access. Your email drafts, your cloud backup, somewhere." She said, "Mum, I don't want to make this into something it isn't." I said, "You are not making it into anything. You are taking a photograph of your arm. That's all." She sent me 3 photographs of your arm. That's all. She sent me 3 photographs. I saved them in 3 separate places. Over the following 6 weeks, I spoke to Francis twice more. I drove back to Toronto at the end of May, for no stated reason other than that I wanted to see my daughter, and I took her to lunch at a restaurant she chose, and I let her talk about whatever she wanted to talk about, and near the end of the meal, I slid a piece of paper across the table. On it was written Francis's name and phone number, and the name of a shelter in Toronto that I had researched, a place with a strong track record and a private intake process, and the address of a legal aid clinic that handled family matters. I said, "You do not have to do anything with this. You don't have to make any decisions today or tomorrow or next month, but I want you to have those numbers in your possession, somewhere he won't find them." Renée looked at the piece of paper. She did not pick it up. Then she said, "What if I'm wrong about what this is?" I said, "Then you'll have some phone numbers you don't need, and that costs you nothing." She folded the piece of paper and put it in her coat pocket. On the last day of June, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang at 6:45. It was Renée. She said, "I need you to come." Her voice was very steady in the way that voices are steady when they have moved past shaking. She said she had called Francis the night before. She said she had a bag packed. She said Garrett had gone to a conference in Calgary and she had until Thursday. I was in my car by 7:15. When I arrived at her apartment, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and her packed bag by the door, and a look on her face that I can only describe as someone who has made a decision and is sitting very quietly on the other side of it. She had the photograph saved in 2 places. She had 3 months of bank statements that she had printed, quietly, over the past several weeks, from the joint account, not because Francis had asked her to, but because she had thought to do it herself. My daughter, who at 9 years old had included a bibliography, we left together. She did not take much. Her laptop, her documents, her father's old watch that had been on the kitchen counter, the gold earrings, which she found in the pocket of a winter coat Garrett had put away in the storage locker. She picked those up and held them for a moment, and then put them in her hand and closed her fingers around them. Francis met us that afternoon. The process was not fast. These things are never fast. There were difficult weeks and difficult conversations, and a morning in November when Renée called me in tears because the legal proceedings were dragging and she felt like nothing would ever be resolved, and she was exhausted in a way that had no bottom to it. I stayed on the phone with her for 2 hours. I said what I knew to be true from 31 years of watching people come through things, that the exhaustion was real and she was allowed to feel it, and that it would not stay this heavy forever. She got through the autumn. She got through the legal process. She got a settlement that was fair. She found a new apartment, hers, just hers, in a neighborhood she chose because she liked the bookshop on the corner and the park 2 blocks away. She went back to work, not at the old consulting firm, but at a new one, a smaller one, doing work she described to me over the phone one evening as actually interesting again. She started wearing the gold earrings again. I noticed it on a video call and I did not say anything about it, but I thought about it for a long time after we hung up. Pamela, I understand, has had strong opinions about the divorce. I have chosen not to have any feelings about Pamela's opinions, because Pamela's opinions are not relevant to my daughter's life anymore, and irrelevance is a more complete consequence than anger. Garrett has tried, to 2 intermediaries, to suggest that the legal proceedings were unnecessary and that things have been getting better. I have no response to that either. I simply note that the photographs exist, that the bank statements exist, that my notes exist, and that the legal record exists, and that getting better is a phrase that requires a baseline, and no baseline involving my daughter should have looked the way it looked. What I want to say, what I have been working my way toward through all of this, is about the moment at the birthday dinner table, not the moment I smiled. After that, there was a second moment, quieter, that I have thought about more. It was when the waiter came back to confirm the orders, and I said, "The salmon, please," and across the table my daughter looked up. Just for a second. She looked up, and our eyes met, and I held her gaze for a moment, steady and clear, and I watched something in her face shift, just slightly, the way light shifts when a cloud moves. She knew I had seen. She knew I was not leaving. That is the thing they cannot plan for, people like Garrett. They cannot plan for someone who has been watching for a long time, who knows what evidence looks like and how to preserve it, who is not going to react in the moment and make the situation about herself. They cannot plan for a mother who has 31 years of experience in exactly this. I am 63 years old. I am retired. I have a garden that is finally, after years of stubbornness, actually thriving. I have a daughter who texts me ordinary things again, recipes, articles, a photograph of the view from her apartment window on a clear day. Ordinary, lovely, unremarkable things. The kind of things you only send when you are not afraid. If you are watching this and something in it sounds familiar, not the details but the feeling, the careful voice, the smile that doesn't reach the eyes, please take the photographs. Please keep the records. Please do not decide alone that it isn't bad enough to matter. It is enough. You are enough. And there is someone in your life who is ready to come when you call. What city are you listening from? And what part of this story stayed with you? I think about the notebook a lot. Not the photographs, not the legal proceedings, not even the phone call I made from that restaurant restroom. I think about the notebook I kept in my bedside drawer, the one where I wrote down dates and observations in my own handwriting, quietly for months, while I waited for my daughter to be ready. There is something people get wrong about situations like Renée's. They think the person inside it cannot see what is happening. They think she is blind, or naive, or weak. She was none of those things. She was someone who had been told slowly and consistently over the course of years that her own perceptions were unreliable. That is not weakness. That is the result of sustained, calculated effort by someone who understood exactly what he was doing. Garrett was not careless. He was precise. And precision like that does not come undone in a single conversation. What I learned, and I say learned, even after 31 years of practice, because some things only become real when they happen to your own family, is that integrity is not only about what you do in the open, it is about what you do when no one is watching and the stakes feel impossibly personal. I could have confronted Garrett at that birthday table. I could have made a scene, drawn lines, forced a crisis. It would have felt satisfying for about 30 seconds, and then Renée would have been left alone in that apartment with a man who had just watched her mother publicly humiliate him, and I would have driven back to Nova Scotia feeling righteous, and nothing would have changed except that things would have gotten worse. Integrity in that dining room looked like picking up a wine glass slowly and keeping my face absolutely still. And Renée, I want to say this plainly, Renée is one of the most clear-thinking people I have ever known. Not because she got out, though that took enormous courage, but because, in the middle of all of it, she kept some part of her mind working. She printed those bank statements herself, quietly, over weeks, without anyone asking her to. She thought to do it. The instinct was still there, underneath everything he had done to muffle it. Intelligence like that does not disappear under pressure. It goes quiet. It waits. And when there is the smallest opening, it begins again. And then there is the matter of what it actually costs to keep going when you are tired in a way that has no bottom to it. Renée called me in November, mid-proceedings, and she sounded like someone who had been swimming for a very long time with no shore in sight. I did not tell her it would be over soon, because I did not know that. I told her what I believed to be true, that the exhaustion was real and she was allowed to feel it, and that she had already done the hardest part, which was deciding. The rest was just time and paperwork. Endurance is not dramatic. It does not look like anything from the outside. It looks like getting up in the morning when you do not feel like it and answering one more email and eating something and going to sleep and doing it again. She did that every day for months. I have her gold earrings on in my mind right now. Not literally, but I remember seeing them on that video call and thinking, there she is, the whole person. Still there. That is what I want to leave you with. Not a lesson exactly, just an observation from someone who has watched a lot of people come through a lot of hard things. The qualities that carry you through are not always visible at the time. You do not always know you are being brave when you are being brave. You do not always know you are being clear-headed when the world is telling you otherwise. But those things in you, the sense of right and wrong, the part of your mind that keeps working even when it is exhausted, the capacity to endure one more day. They do not leave you. They just wait. Take care of someone today. It might be yourself.